Good morning, knuckleheads. I just wanted to jump on here real quick. This time every year, I start getting questions on two things: morel mushrooms and when do I start fishing for flatheads. Both of those things. So, um, I guess it just comes from the years of guiding and posting about flatheads and mushrooms, and um, guess there are a few people out there that think I know what I'm talking about. So, um, here we are. Mushrooms and flatheads, unfortunately, usually start happening about the same time, which kind of sucks because if you go fishing for flatheads and you don't catch any, then you sit in your boat as you're cleaning up and getting ready to go thinking, man, I should have went mushroom hunting. And you go mushroom hunting and you walk 12 miles and you don't find crap, and then you're thinking, man, I should have went flathead fishing. I wasted all this time walking around. So that's the most frustrating part about it that you're going to encounter if you get into both seriously. And they kind of both require the same thing, as far as temperature goes. Flatheads, once the water gets into the 50s, they usually start, they'll start moving around, even the upper 40s, um, but they become really catchable, when that water temperature gets into the upper 50s and into the 60s, they become really catchable. And again, I said really catchable. They're catchable before that, but really catchable. They really start feeding. They'll hit big cut baits, small cut baits, small live baits. You just never know. But upper 50s, low 60s is when they become really targetable, catchable. You know, um, yes, I've caught flatheads down to targeted and caught flatheads down into the upper 40s, 48, 49. I've accidentally caught them colder than that, but only a handful. So that's why I say targetable, catchable. Uh, and mushrooms is kind of the same thing. I mean, your soil temperature gets into the low 50s and um, maintains that temperature 51, 52, 53 for a few days, then the mushrooms start coming. So, um, just the way it is, just the way it goes. Um, Obviously, one being a fungus that grows on ground, and the other being a live animal that lives in the water. Two very different things to chase, um, but they seem to be tough for most people, both of them. And fishing for flatheads as long as I have, I understand that, flatheads can be really tough and unpredictable and hard to catch consistent and all that good stuff. I mean, they are a fish, and they don't move around and do as much active feeding and chasing of baits and stuff like channel catfish will and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, hi, tap that screen, hit them likes, man, help a brother out. Anyway, um, so you know figuring out where flatheads are, I have found over the years people say, well, what when they start moving, where are you target? um I always target flatheads during different times of the year, but it's always the same kind of stuff. It's always some kind of cover, whether that's wood or rock or bridge pillars or whatever you want to, ledges, heads of holes, you know. Um, that never seems to really change as much as a lot of the other fish do. I mean, like channel cats, they, in the cold water times, you're targeting them in deep water, whatever's considered deep for your river system anyway. You're targeting them in deep water, and then as the water warms up, you can catch them deep and shallow. And then as the water gets really warm, most people target them more in shallow water. And, so flatheads, as far as where you target them at, doesn't seem to change as much. You can always target them deep, excuse me. But you can target them shallow as well. But you're targeting them in the average water that you'll target flatheads in will, typically over the course of a year, it's going to be deeper than what you'll target channel cats in. But I could remember a time in my life fishing. I went through a period for 3 or 4 years where I only wanted to target big channel cats. Doing really well. Caught a lot up here. I caught a lot of 7 to 9, 10, 11 pound channel cats. Got fortunate enough to catch a couple 18 pounders, which was in the Rock River, but however was in the stretch leading up from the Mississippi. Those are both 18. One was 18.1, one was 18. I caught them actually the same day. And then another day in the same stretch, I caught a 20 pound. Well, I didn't catch. Guide client caught a 20 pound 1 ounce channel cat. Those are the 3 biggest channel cats I've had in my boat fishing the Rock, Mississippi proper right here. So, hi everybody. Tap that screen, hit them likes for me if you would. But there is big channel cats up above too. That's just so happened I caught all my biggest ones up the mouth of the Rock River within the mile or two. So no biggie. Anyway, switching over to mushrooms. The Morel mushrooms seem to be a mystery to a lot of people, and the reason why I know they are great to eat, and I love them. However, I'm not sure if people like them more because of the flavor or just because they are rare. You get this period of 1 to 3, max 4 weeks if everything stays just right, where you can find these things a year, and then that's it. So what you want typically is you want the ground to warm up slow, get into that low 50s mark, and then when you get close, then you want 3 to 5 days of 70, 80 degree weather with a mixture of sun and a bunch of rain like we have right now. I have not seen the elements for a awesome mushroom fruiting, or whatever you want to call it, crappie. I haven't seen everything be so right for the Morel mushrooms in a year as they are right now. We literally warmed up slow. It wasn't one of them periods where the ground was thawed and then we went from 33 degrees soil temperature or 32 degree soil temperature, up to into the 50s right away, and then it got hot, and then so then you get a quick bloom, and you got a week to find the mushrooms, and then they kind of dry out and they kind of go away. But when the soil temperature warms up nice and even and slow, and it's pretty close to the same temperature everywhere, and you're steadily getting rain the whole time this is happening, and then it gets to that right temperature, and you've got a ton of moisture in the soil, and you continue to get the rainfall, and then in between you get some moments of hot sun, maybe a couple days, and then they start to bloom, and they just are freaking coming. And then what you want is for it to cool off, and then you want your highs to go back down into the 50s and the 60s. Maintain maybe a little rainfall, but you want them temperatures to drop and then stay cool. 50s and 60s is really good. And what that does is it extends the bloom. So, yeah. So, feed them, get all that moisture build up, get it to the right temperature, and then cool off, and try to keep that ground temperature from spiking too high right away. You don't want it to go from 51 to 53 and they start blooming, and then within 3 or 4 days the ground temperature's into the 60s. In a lot of situations, what happens then is you get that initial bloom, everything gets right, and then it gets out of range, and then it just stops. And you get a week of pretty good hunting, and then that's it. So hit that like button, everybody. And then you excuse me. And then when it cools off, like I said, that ground temperature doesn't spike too high. And that just kind of lets them keep blooming. And if you're getting a little bit of moisture and even some cloud cover, they'll continue to come, and you'll walk into patches. Maybe you find an area where you find 7 or 8, or you find a big patch where you find 50, 75. You leave them alone, and 2 days later you'll come back in and there'll be a few more. 2 days later you come back in, there'll be a few more, and so on and so forth. So that is the perfect scenario for mushrooms. The ground warms up slow, steady moisture, you get to the right temp, you get some more moisture, and then the temperature levels off, and that ground temperature stays in that zone or warms up very, very slowly. And then what you have is the makings for a amazing morel mushroom hunt, amazing morel mushroom season. So it's the same with fish. It's the same with the flatheads. They, you don't want the water temperatures to go from 35 to 70 in a week, and it makes it extremely hard to keep up with what they're doing. Instead of being in their wintering holes, and then being in their wintering holes and starting to feed a little bit, and then starting to move up shallow and move upstream and move to cover and stuff like that. Okay, it's almost like a shock takes place. Water temperature warms up 15 degrees in 4 or 5 days, and it can make some of the toughest fishing you can ever do. Everybody knows that flathead fishing's tough enough the way it is. Now all of a sudden you've had the water has come up big time and warmed up 15, 18 degrees in a very short time. And then you're like, you can completely lose track of the fish and what they're doing. It's like they don't even know what they're doing anymore. So that can make things tough. So it's the same thing. A perfect flathead season is the same way. Maybe you get your flood February, March, even into early April, but the water's still cool. Then as May comes, late April, May comes, your water kind of starts to slowly recede and level off, steadily rises into the mid-50s, into the 60s, and the fishing is usually, especially targeting flatheads, is much, much better for numbers and size, because the fish are doing exactly what you expect them to do. They haven't been forced to, go from not eating to trying to gorge themselves, and where did they go? You know, because sometimes big floods will push them, especially if you have multiple floods in a spring. You know, it can really spread them out. Um, Maybe where they were wintering at is perfect for water for your river system, where when that river system is low or at normal level or close to normal level, even a little high, but close to normal level, this area here is really, really good for your flatheads, right? Well, as that water rises too high and maybe the current starts to affect it, even down on the bottom where maybe they're laying behind a wing dam, maybe they're laying along a log, or maybe whatever. All of a sudden, the current flow down there changes, and maybe it starts blowing them around and moving them, and they can't sit still. Well, if the water's still cold, they're going to move because they've got their system shut down. They're lethargic and they're cold blooded. They don't. They're trying to conserve energy, not expend energy. So when that happens, typically, they're going to move. And then what happens? Okay, so they move, and then the water recedes. And now they're not in the ideal situation, so they got to move again. And then the water goes back up. And this whole time, the water is steady and warming, and then it gets high and cool, and then it drops down and warms back up, and then it gets high and it cools off a little bit, and that just messes. That can make an extremely hard spring. So weather and stuff, it makes or breaks you. But again, be excited if you're a mushroom hunter from central Illinois north right now. Southern Wisconsin, looks like southern Minnesota, northeastern Iowa. It looks like the temperatures, the rain, everything that you need for a good or a great spring for a great mushroom hunt has really, really transpired and is really coming together. Again, this is I'm live. Today's what, April 4th, 11th, 12th, 13th. Today's April 15th. I'm live. I found some mushrooms yesterday. And it has happened just perfect. And then we got more rain again last night. And the current temperature is 62 degrees. Yesterday it got up to 81, 82. It's supposed to be very warm the next couple days. And then next week, 50s and 60s. So this should get them started. They've hit the trigger, right? They've reached the trigger. Now this should get them started. And next week's temperatures cooling off should keep them coming. It preserves the ones that do come up, doesn't dry them out as fast. Then you have to worry about them getting wet and soggy, but that takes a lot longer than it does for them to dry out. But anyway, so anyway, I guess with that being said, if you are a Morel mushroom hunter up in the counties and the areas that I just mentioned, should be really, really excited. I thinking now I've picked over 800 mushrooms in a day quite a few times in my life. But sorry about that. And I'm thinking that this year I might have some days like that. It's really, really things are really set up for that. So if you happen across this live, the tape version of it, be excited. Flathead fishing. Our water hasn't gotten out of control here yet, but if we get a lot more, the things are getting high. But if we get a lot more, that may mess up some. But the good news is flooded water around here is great for channel catfishing. So you can always do that if if it discourages you from chasing flatheads, the channel catfishing is going to be phenomenal. So, of course, when you get high water for long periods of time, them channel cats, they tend to gorge, and then you can have days where, yeah, the water rose overnight, but everything should be perfect, and you just can't catch them, or they short bite or whatever. And that happens a lot of times when the water's high for long periods of time, because, you know, they're stuffed. They're up in the grass feeding. There's all kinds of worms and grubs and insects in the water, and they just have food everywhere they go. And that happens. So, anywho, God bless you all. Have a great day. And I hope you enjoyed this. And that's it. I appreciate you. Have a good one all.